Outsmarting rich kids in the finance industry. This is a guide from myself who's worked at Goldman Sachs, and I didn't come from a particularly wealthy background, but hopefully I can share with you some helpful information on how to deal with that type of environment. Now, the finance industry is full of nepotism. There is a lot of people who have got their job not based on their ability, based on having connections. Maybe they're the son of a wealthy hedge fund CEO and they managed to get hooked up with a job in sales at a major investment bank. And it can be difficult to deal with those type of personalities, right? People who don't necessarily have the skills, don't really have the ability, but they're someone you have to deal with who's not necessarily the smartest person or the most skilled. And you've kind of worked your way up through hard work, dedication, throughout your education and your work in the industry, and you're kind of dealing with that kind of mismatch with some of the characters you end up dealing with in the finance industry. So it can be difficult to deal with in terms of that environment and climbing the corporate ladder when you are dealing with those type of difficult characters. So here is what you need to know about outworking those type of mediocre rich kids. It's a strategy. What I'm going to share with you some of the tips. It's something I used at Goldman Sachs, at Morgan Stanley, and at HSBC when I've been working at those for over 10 years combined. So some examples of when it comes to working with a type of nepotistic system within the finance industry or unqualified hires. I've worked at a major investment bank where someone who had got a job on my team in a hedge fund sales role, they're actually the son of a CEO of a major hedge fund, and they're working in the investment bank I was at on the trading floor. They clearly lacked skills. They clearly lacked basic kind of understanding of finance. And not only that, when they got their job, the company overlooked the fact that this person had a criminal record because they were the son of a major client, essentially, right? Without mentioning the company I was working for at the time or what was going on there. But I'm thinking in any other case, if myself or you had a criminal record for physically assaulting someone, we wouldn't be getting a job, right? We wouldn't be getting a job at a major investment bank. But this person, they get it overlooked. In another case, there was someone who's working in another sales role, and they got hired. It was a female employee. And they also had a physical assault charge on their record of doing some crime in another country, and they got hired. And they overlooked this as, in both cases, it was just when they were younger, they got into a physical altercation. It doesn't matter too much. In any other case, if they weren't someone who is well connected in the right social circles, they'd be considered a threat to the company's reputation. There was a media scandal, this person you've hired, they've committed assault or grievous bodily harm on other people, they probably wouldn't have got a job. But because they're connected to the right people, that gets overlooked. So just be aware of some of the biases you have to deal with, which are quite annoying to see and deal with. And then there have been other instances when it comes to interviewing candidates where there is a focus not necessarily on the person's ability, but whether they meet the diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements, which now are a focus of major companies, particularly in the finance industry. So you have two candidates. One might be particularly skilled and qualified, but then you have another candidate who is not as skilled, but they talk about all the right things. They might be from the right background of the particular gender or relationship preference, and then they get treated more favorably because they're conveying all the right ideologies. They're mentioning liberalism, feminism, climate change activism, things like that, which are all of a sudden a focus of an industry where you think the focus would be who's the most skilled and talented. But unfortunately, things are more focused on ideology rather than competency in the industry as of now. Now, another thing I'd want to mention to you is what type of advice I could give you to help you deal with this type of environment, which is quite a challenge. Now, number one, I want you to focus on yourself. Maximize your performance and try to ignore the favoritism that others receive. I know it can be difficult to see you're kind of playing a rigged game or working in a system that isn't quite as fair as they've told you it is, but it's important to maximize your performance, ignore the favoritism that others receive. So that's point number one. Point number two is don't let these other colleagues who might be from that kind of privileged background Don't let them use you. Don't let them think, okay, well, they don't know what they're doing, and throughout their life, they've leaned on other people to maybe do their homework at their private school. They've leaned on their parents to give them money when they didn't bother working for the money they wanted. They maybe worked at other companies, and the managers and co-workers did a lot of work for them. Don't let people use you. That's a very important thing in the corporate environment. You have a specific job description. You do your job. And if someone can't do their job, you help them to a little bit, and then you can maybe talk to your manager saying, oh, I've had some questions from this person. Is there some help they can get from others? You're not here to do other people's job just to get a pat on the back and not any extra pay. If people want you to do someone else's job, get paid to do it. If they're not paying you, you're not doing it. That's it. You can be helpful and friendly and do a little bit here and there, but you're not here to let other people use you, particularly if they're coming from a privileged background where if they lose their job tomorrow, they're not going to be in any difficulty. But if you have to dedicate an extra hour of your day every day at work doing their job, not yours, it could detriment your life, your ability to do your job in your free time at the end of the day. Don't let them use you. That's point number 2. Number 3 is accept your differences. So you're dealing with someone who came from a different privileged environment, and just accept that you're different from them. You can be friendly with them and be concise with them, and try not to create an adversarial relationship, even though if you're not too keen on that particular person, just try to be as professional as possible. They can probably already sense that they're less skilled, less talented, they have less life experience, they have less job experience than others, and they're in a position of privilege, and they're probably dealing with some of their insecurities in terms of relying on other people and not being able to do a job even though they come from a wealthy background. So you can consider it a ceasefire. That's how I would see it. Like, okay, cool, we're from different backgrounds, we have different beliefs, we have different life circumstances, financial circumstances. I'm here to do my job, you do your job, and we can take it from there. The fourth point, the fourth bit of advice, is to find your next job to secure a pay rise. So if you're working at a company and they're prioritizing all these other things that I mentioned before that have nothing to do necessarily with meritocracy, they want to hire employees based on if they're the son of a major hedge fund owner. They want to overlook a female employee's criminal background. They're holding them to a different standard as you. They're comfortable with a co-worker who's well connected to do less work, and they're expecting you to do more work or take on their work. You should just find your next job and secure a pay rise. So, typically if you want a pay rise, you can get something from the company you're working at, but typically the pay rises are going to come from moving to another company. So understand the current company you're working for, they're not focused on performance, they're focused on nepotism, on networking, rather than who's actually doing the work, doing the job. And it's probably not somewhere you want to be long term. So just bear that in mind when you are in that type of scenario. And then when you find your next job, you get a pay rise. You might even have less work to do for more money. You'll be able to push your career forward and get away from the unfair work environment you've been dealing with. And then tip number 5, and it's the final tip, is compare and contrast your performance. If you're put in a position where you effectively have to work at the same level as an employee who's not kind of pulling their weight, they're coming from this type of privileged background, when you're discussing things with management in a nice way, you can emphasize the work you're doing, what you have done, or in a nice way, compare and contrast what other people are not doing, or how you need to extend and dedicate extra work hours to help others who are not pulling their weight and doing their job. That's very important. So just bear in mind, when you're working on work projects with those type of co-workers, you're clearly documenting on an email trail somewhere, this is what I'm doing, this is what they're doing. There's a bit of a mismatch here. It's not necessarily evenly shared, but I'm happy to do the extra work for now, given I'm adequately paid for it. So that's something to bear in mind too. So just to finish up, right, in this video, you learned how to outsmart rich kids in the finance industry, and a guide from myself after working 10 years in the investment banking industry. So a couple key points here. Number 1, focus on yourself. Number 2, don't let them use you. Number 3, accept your differences. Number 4, find your next job and secure a pay rise. And number 5, compare and contrast your performance in the nicest way possible. Now, if you're looking for more insider career tips, things I used throughout my 10-year career in the industry, look for the ebook in the description. So just have a look down there, you'll find it. And if you want to learn more, I have these videos on the screen right now that'll help you with your career. See you in the next video.